Oh, good evening, everyone. How y'all doing? I want to read this story. It's a true story about a young man who was accused of murder, which he didn't do. Um, Lynching of Jesse Washington, and I'm going to be reading this. Make sure everything's set up here. Okay. That's not it. That's not what I'm looking for. Oh, yes, it is. That's what it is. Graphic accounts of the recent horrible lynching in Waco, Texas. This is July 19th, July 15th, year 1916. Crisis investigation details events connected with a lynch of a colored boy. New York Crisis. An account of the recent burning of a human being at Waco, Texas. It's reported by a special agent of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People or African American people, 75th Avenue, New York City. The city of Waco, Texas is the county seat of McLean County. It is situated on the Brazos River, about halfway between Dallas and Austin. It is the junction point of seven railways to the city. It's fertile agriculture region with grain, cotton as its chief products, with nearly 200 manufacturing establishments representing several different industries. It had a population of 14,445 in 1890, which increased to 20,686 in 1900 and to 26,425 in 1910. The white population in the 20 years has almost exceeded double. The African American population has increased from 4,069 to 6,067, forming 23% of the population. The bulk of the population is native white of native percentage. There's being only about 1,000 foreigners in the city. The whole of McLean County contained in 1910 a population of 73,250, of whom 17,234 were African Americans. The total population had nearly doubled in the last 20 when last 20 years. Yeah, there it is down here. Last 20 years. Waco is well laid out. The streets are broad, over 60 miles of them being paved. The sewer systems of hundreds of miles is exactly there is a fine city-owned water system and parks surrounding um, parties. Uh, there are 39 whites and 29 African American churches in Waco. By the domination of the white churches are Baptist, Methodist, and Christian, and past, Presbyterian Jews, uh, and so on. The college are Baylor University, Baylor County, and the Catholic colleges, independent biological and industrial schools, all white. And the Central Texas College is Paul Quinn African American College. There are also, let's see, there we go. Also, the A&M College, the Gurley Schools, the Waco Business College, Toby Practical Business College, Provincial Sanitarium, and the Training School. Now, Baylor University was founded in 1854 and has between 1,200 and 1,300 students. It is a co-educational. The president is running for the United States Senate. Two high schools serve whites and African American. The population, and there are seven banks, including 4 national banks. In other words, Waco is a tropical southern town, pushing in the rich. The crime, nearly the county town of Robinson, some 6 miles from Waco, lived a white family of 4, named Farr, who owned a small farm. The family called Prey, who owned a small farm. They cultivate themselves with the help of one hired man, an African American boy of 17, named Jesse Washington. Jesse was a big, well-developed by ignorance. Being unable either to read or write, he seemed to have been swollen, a perhaps mental defect with a strong and even enduring temper. It is said that on this Saturday night before the crime, he had a fight with a neighbor white man, and the white man had threatened to kill him. On that Monday, May 8th, Mr. Prayer, his son, 14-year-old, and his daughter, a 23-year-old, were hoeing cotton in one part of their farm. The boy, Jesse, was plowing with his mule and sowing cotton seed near the house where Miss Frey was alone. He went to the house for more cotton seed. As Miss Frey was scooping it up for him into the bag which he held, she scolded him for beating the mule, for he knocked her down with the blacksmith hammer. And as he confessed criminally, assaulted her. Finally, he killed her with the hammer, and the boy then returned to the field, finished his work, and went home to the cabin where he lived with his father and mother and several brothers and sisters. There were some, but not much, doubt of his guilt. The confessions were obtained, of course, under duress, and were perhaps the suspicious clear and not entirely in the boy's own words. It seems, however, probability that the boy was guilty of murder and possible premeditated murder. Now, Waco's politics. Meantime, existing of Waco politics are said to have demand lynching. Our investigator says they brought the boy back to Waco because of lynching was of the politic value of that county. Officially, who are running for office. Every man I talked with said the politics was at the bottom of the whole business. All the elements who took part in the lynching will vote for the sheriff. The judge is the value of his party. because he appointed the 3 commissioners, and those commissioners picked the grand jury. The district judge of the criminal courts is R.I. Monroe, appointed by Governor Campbell. He is the low order of the politicians and the product of a local machine. His reputation for morally is bad, and his practice at the bar has been largely on behalf of the vicious interests. The sheriff of the county, S.S. Fleming, said is a candidate for a re-election and has made much politics capital out of the lynching. He said in an advertisement in Waco Semi-Weekly Tribune, Mr. Fleming is discussed with a broad thinking. He believes in the quality of men he carries with him in daily walks of his officially dorm. None of the boast of the herald or the pump of the power. He is just a curiosity, just as obligation, just commenting the sheriff as was when selling buggies and cultivators. For the hardware company, he presents the 2 voters for their endorsement and the record made by him and his corps of splendid deputies. Our investigator says, when I saw the sheriff Fleming, he had the beautiful story to tell. He had his story fixed up so that the entire responsibility was shifted on the judge. The judge admitted he could have a charge of venue, but said the mob anywhere would have done the same thing. Meantime, the tip went out. The crowd began pouring into the town the day before and continued early Monday morning. The courtroom was packed full and crowded. Of 2,000 was on the outside, and the jurors could scarcely get in and out of their seats. I asked the judge if he could not have clear the courtroom and answered that I did not know the South. I said, if a person is big enough, he can get up and stop the biggest mob. He asked, do you want to spill innocent blood for the African American? Someone had arranged it so that it would be easier to get the boy out of the courtroom. A door which opened by the cellular device had been fixed so that he would open. One of the jurors was convinced the murderer with a suspicion suspended sentence over him. Lee Jenkins is the best deputy sheriff, but he is under Fleming. Barney Goldberg, the other deputy sheriff, said if Lee Jenkins had it, would never have been, but we are working for the man higher up and must take our order from him. Barney Goldberg knows perfectly well that if Fleming is not reelected and the other candidate gets in, he will be out of a job. The other nominate, the sheriff Buchanan, is reported to be unable to read and write, but it's said to have 3 dead African Americans to his credit. The boy Jesse Washington was asked what he thought about the mob coming after him. He said, they promised they would not if I would tell them about it. He seemed not to care, but was thoroughly indifferent. The trial was hurried through in the Waco Semi-Weekly Tribune. May 17th says the jury returned to court at 11:22 a.m. and present a verdict. We, the jury, found the defendant guilty of the murder as charged in indictment and assessed his punishment to death. This was signed by W.B. Baziliton Foreman. Is that your verdict, gentlemen? Asked the Judge Monroe. The answer, yes. Judge Monroe began writing in his document he had written May 15th, 1916, juror's verdict in guilty. And as he wrote, there was a hush over the entire courtroom. It was the moment of hesitation, but just a moment. Then the tall man started over the heads of the crowds. Fred H. Kingsbury, who was standing alongside the Judge Monroe, said they are coming after him. And as the judge looked up, the wave of people surged for the courtroom accommodation 500 person, but the judge had allowed 1,015 person to crowd in. Our investigation continues. Stonograph told me that there was a pause of the full minute. He said the people crowded around him and knew what was coming. So he slipped out of the back door of the sheriff with the records, and Sheriff Fleming slipped out also. Now, Fleming claims that all he was called upon to do in the way of protecting the boy was to get him to court. A big fellow in the back of the courtroom yelled, "Get the African American." Bernie Goldberg, one of the deputy sheriff, told me that he did not know that Fleming had dropped the orders to let him get the African American and pull his revolver. Afterwards, he got his friends to swear to affidavit that he was not presented. Fleming said he had sworn in 50 deputies. I asked him where they were. He asked, would you want to protect the African American? The judge made no effort to stop the mob, although he had a firearm in his desk. The burning. They dragged the boy down the stairs, put him on a chain around his body, and hitched it to an automobile. The chain broke. The big fellow took the chain off the African American under the cover of the crowd and wounded it around his own waist, so that the crowd jerked at the chain was jerking at the man's waist. He was holding the boy. The boy shrunk and struggled. The mob ripped the boy's clothes off, cut them into bits, and even cut the boy. Someone cut his ear off. Someone else unisexed him. A little girl working for the firm of Goldstein and Mingle told me that she saw this done. I went over to the route to the boy had been taken and saw that they dragged him between a quarter and a half a mile from the courthouse to the bridge, and then dragged him up 2 blocks and another block over to the city hall. After they had gotten him up to the bridge, someone said that a fire was already going up at the city hall, and they turned around and went back. Several people denied that this fire was going, but the photograph shows that it was. They got a little boy to lit the fire. While fire was being prepared of boxes, the naked boy was stabbed and chained, put over the tree. He tied to away, but he could not. He reached up and grabbed the chain, and they cut off his fingers. The big man struck the boy on the back of the neck with a knife, just as they were pulling him up on the tree. Mr. Lester thought that was the death blow. He was lowered into the fire several times by the means of the chain round his neck. Someone said they would estimate the boy had about 25 stab wounds, none of them death dealing. About 1:15, a friend got the torso. It hung a rope over and implement a saddle and dragged it around through the streets of Waco. Very little drinking was done. The tree where the lynching occurred was right under the mayor's window. Mayor Dulans was standing in the window, not concerned about what they are doing to that boy, but that the tree would be destroyed. The chief of police also witnessed the lynching. The names of the 5 leaders of the mob are known to association and can be had an application by responsible parties. Women and children saw the lynching. One man held up his little boy above his head and the crowd so that he could see. And little boy was in the top of the very tree to which the African American boy was hanged, where he stayed until the fire became too hot. Another account in the Waco Time Herald Monday night says great mass of humanity flew as swiftly as possible through the streets of the city in order to be present at the bridge when the hanging took place. But when it was learned that the African American was being taken to the city hall lawn, a crowd of men and women and children turned and hastened to the lawn. On the way to the scene of the burning, people on every hand took a hand in showing their feeling in the matter by striking the African American, which with any obtained. Some struck him with shovels, bricks, clubs, and others stabbing him and cutting him until when he was strung up, his body was a solid color of red. The blood of the many wounds inflicted covered him from head to toe. Dry good boxes and all kinds of inflammable materials were gathered, and it required but instant the culvert this into something flames when the African American was first hoisted into the air. His tongue protruded from his mouth, and his face was just smeared with blood. Life was not exact within the African boy body, although nearly so when another chain was placed around the neck, thrown over the limb of the tree of the lawn, everybody trying to get to the Negro or African American, and have some part in his death. An infraction mob then learned that the African American who was half alive and half dead against the tree, he's having just strength enough within his limbs to support himself. As rapidly as possible, the African American boy was then jerked into the air, at which a shot from thousands of throats whipped up on the morning air, and dry good boxes excel. Wood and every other article that would burn was then evidence appear as if with magic. A huge dry good box was then produced and filled to the top with all of material that has been secured. The African American body was swinging in the air, and all of the time, a noise of thousands was heard, and the African American body was lowered into the box. No sooner had his body touched the box than the people pressed forward, each eager to be the first to light the fire matches where it touches the inflammable materials, and smoke rapidly rose in the air, such as demonstration as of people gone mad was never heard before. Everybody pressed closer to get souvenirs the of the fair. When they had finished with the African American, his body was mutilated, fingers, ears pierced, pieces of clothing, toes, and other parts of the African American body were cut off by members of the mob that had crowd to the scene as if magic when they word that the African American had been taken in charge by the mob heralded over the city. As the smoke rose to heavens, the mass of people numbering in the neighborhood of 10,000 crowding in the city hall lawn, overflowing the square, hanging from the window of buildings and trees, set up at shots that was heard blocks away. Onlookers were hanging from the windows of the city hall and every other buildings that commanded a sight of the burning. And as African American boy body commenced to burn, shout delightful went up from the thousands of throats, and apparently everybody demonstrating in some way their satisfaction at retribution that was being visited upon the predators of such horrible crime, the worst in the annal of McLean County of history. The body of the African American was burned to a crisp and was left for some time in the smoldering remains of the fire. Women and children who desired to view the scene were allowed to do so, the crowds parting to let them look on the scene. After some time, the body of African American was jerked into the air where everybody could view the remains, and mighty shout rose on the air. Photographer Gildersleeves made several pictures of the body, as well as a large crowd which surrounded the scene as spectators. I'm gonna get something to drink. Hold on. The photographers knew where the lynching was to take place, and had his cameras in Pennsylvania. Can't say it. In the city hall, he was called by the telephone at the proper moment. He writes, "We have quite selling the mob photos. This step was taken because our city dad objects on the grounds of bad public, as we wanted to be boosters and not knockers. We agree to stop all sales." F.A. Gildersleeve. Our agent continues, while the torso of the boy was being dragged through the streets. Behind the horse, the limbs dropped off, and the head was put on the stoop of the despicable woman in the reservation district. Some little boys pulled out the teeth and sold them to some men for $5 apiece. The chain was sold for 25 cents a link. From the pictures, the boy was apparently a wonderful built boy. The torso was taken to Robertson, hanged to the tree, and shown off for a while. Then they took it down again and dragged it back to town and put it on the fire again at 5 o'clock. The aftermath. I tried to talk to the judge. I met him on the street and said, "I want to talk with you about something very important." He asked, "What is the nature of it?" I said, "I want to get your opinion of that lynching." He said, "No, I refuse to talk with you about that. What do you want for it?" I said, "If you refuse to talk with me, there is no use of telling you what I want it for." When I met him the second time with a different clothes on, he did not recognize me. I put on a strong English accent and said I was interested in the clippings from the New York paper which showed a Waco. Made for itself an awful name, and I wanted to go back to make the Northerners feel that Waco was not so bad as the paper had represents. Then he gave me the court records. Our investigation continues. I went to the newspaper office. They were all of opinion that the best thing to do was to hush it up. They used it as a news item, and that finished it. Dallas News did not cite anything editorial because not long ago they had done something quite as bad as the boy was not guilty. With the exception of the Tribune, all the papers had simply used it as a news item and let it drop. The Tribune is owned by Judge McLean, who said anything he pleased. He is nearly blind. When I read the article to him, I said I would like to ask you if that had been a colored woman or a white boy. Would you have protected the woman? He answered, no. If it had been the colored boy or the colored woman, no. We would not have stopped the African American doing anything they wanted to. Do you think they would? No, then they prove their superior civilization. Then he began to tell me how he knew all about the African American, and we Northerns do not. He said that as an old Southerner, he knew perfectly well how to handle the colored population. He told me how he was raised with them and a colored mommy nurse at her milk. There is a bunch of people in Waco who are dying to see someone go forward and make a protest, but no one in Waco would do it. Ex-Mayor McKay and Colonel Hamilton both said, "We do not know what to do. We are not organized to do it. It was a case of race and politics. I put it out a lot of wires for a lawyer to take up the case, but no human being in Waco would take it up. I wrote to a friend in Austin, and one in Houston and Austin friend telegraphed me that he would send me word as soon as he had found someone." I had a letter from the Houston friend who gave me the name of 3 lawyers, but I'm not sure whether they would take up a case of this kind. All have their doubts of ever getting case into court. I did not dare ask much about the lawyers. As a result, the lynching of Sunday school convention, which was to have met there within 15,000 delegates, has been stopped. W. A. Roselton, the former of jury, was very outspoken against the whole affair and blames the office officials for it. He felt that as foreman of the jury, he could not lead in the protest, but thought some protests ought to be made. Mr. Ainsworth, one of the newspapermen, seemed the only one who wanted to start a protest. Colonel Hamilton, a man of high standards, a northerner, and at one time a big railroadman, was outspoken against the whole affair, but said that if he led in the protests, they would do the same thing to him. He said he would never register in any hotels that he would come from Waco. 2 Waco men who did not register from Waco. It's hard to read this one. Sanford, ex-mayor of Waco, said the sheriff and the judge before the trial and received assessment that the lynching would not take place. They shout the mouth of the better element of Waco, better telling them that the Robinson people had promised not to do it. They had gotten the promise from Robinson people that they would not touch the boy during the trial, but they did not get the plea of disruption, bunch of Waco that would not start the affair. Judge Spell said the affair was deplorable, but the best thing was to forget it. When representing myself as news reporter, I asked, "What shall I tell the people up north?" Ex-Mayor Mackey said, "Fix it as well as you can for Waco and make them understand that the better thinking men and women of Waco were not in it." I said, "But some of your better men were down there. The whole thing, Savior, so rotten because the better men have not tried to protest against it. Your churches have not said a word. Dr. Caldwell was the only man who made any protest at all." The lynching industrialist. This is account of the one lynching. It is horrible, but it's a match in horror by scores of others. In the last 30 years, and in its legal, law-defying, race-hating aspect, it is matched by 2,842 other lynchings. which have taken place between January the 1st, 1885, June 1st, 1916. Those lynchings are the following: color men lynched by years, 1885 to 1916. 1885, 78. 1870, 1886, 71. 87, 80. 88, 95. 89, 95. 1890, 90. 91, 121, 92, 155. 93, 154. 94, 134. 95, 112. 96, 80. 97, 122. 98, 102. 99, 84. 1900, 107. 1901, 107. 2, 86, 3, 86, 84, 83. 61 and 05. 64 and 06. 60, 07. 93 and 08. 73 and 09. 10, 65. 11, 63. 12, 63. 79 and 13. 69 and 14. 80. 15. And 1960, 5 months, 31. 2,843. What are we going to do about this record? The civilians of America is at stake. The sense of the Christianity and challenge National Association for Advancement of Colored People purpose immediately to raise fund at least $10,000 to start a crusade against this modern barbarism. Already $2,000 is promised conditionally on our raising the whole amount. Introspectively write to Ray Nash, Secretary, 75th Avenue in New York City. Well, there you go. Something in history that no one has ever heard. Hey, Mustang, how you doing? Lurker in here. Who's the lurker? So who's the lurker? So there you go. The history of what happened. And stuff. But I guess not. Well, thanks for all coming. I appreciate Jason coming and Mustang for coming. And so I'll talk to you guys all later. Thanks for all coming.